On the 17th of September 1944, just over 3 months after the Allied landings in Normandy, the British Second Army launched Operation Market Garden, a combined ground and airborne offensive into the Netherlands, which aimed to establish a bridgehead over the River Rhine at the city of Arnhem. Due largely to German resistance and delays in securing key objectives, the operation ultimately failed to achieve its main goal, and as a result, Second Army found itself holding a 90-kilometre long corridor that stretched from the Belgian border in the south to the small town of Driel in the north. To ensure that German forces didn't split this corridor into two, Second Army began expansion operations, starting first on the 12th of October with Operation Constellation on the eastern flank. However, no sooner had Constellation got underway was it brought to an abrupt halt, when the need to open up the Belgian port of Antwerp as soon as possible became the #1 priority for the Western Allies. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the Commander-in-Chief of 21st Army Group, under which Second Army was serving, recalled in his post-war memoirs. The administrative situation was such that until Antwerp was opened, the Allies would be unable to sustain further full-scale offensive operations. On the 16th of October, I issued orders shutting down all offensive operations in 21st Army Group, except those concerned with the opening of Antwerp. To assist with the operations around Antwerp, Second Army transferred the bulk of its weight to the western flank of the corridor. Here, on the 22nd of October 1944, it launched Operation Pheasant, with the 15th Scottish, 51st Highland, 53rd Welsh and 7th Armoured Divisions, advancing on the Dutch cities of s-Hertogenbosch and Tilburg, with the 53rd Divisional History recording. These two cities had been put in a strong state of defence. Their attention was regarded by the Germans as very important, as they protected the withdrawal and supply route of the enemy forces, still denying the port of Antwerp to the Allies. Advancing in the centre of Operation Pheasant was the 51st Highland Division, which moved off from the Sint-Oeden Road area and had established a bridgehead across the River Dommel at the town of St. Michielsgestel by the 24th of October. The following day, troops of the 7th Battalion, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, pushed out from this bridgehead in the direction of Vught, and it was just short of this village that a strong German defensive position temporarily halted the Argylls. Subsequently, on the 26th of October, the 7th Battalion, the Black Watch, with support from the Sherman tanks of C Squadron, the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, were moved up to take over the advance. The War Diary of the 7th Black Watch documents that battalion orders are to take Vught, and it is decided to make a right hook past the 7th Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, who had been held up advancing down the main road. B Company, having a troop of tanks in support, started out at 0830. B Company passed through taking prisoners, and by 12:30 hours debushed into Vught, where only scattered opposition is met. By 13:30 hours, battalion had taken up position just north of Vught. Considerable mopping up was then carried out, and a total of over 200 prisoners were sent back to the Division Prisoner of War cage. In conjunction with the advance of the 7th Black Watch, the men of the 5th Battalion, the Queen's Own Cameroon Highlanders, were similarly pushing forward to Vught on the left flank. Starting from the hamlet of Groenendaal, the 5th Cameroons, with the Shermans of A Squadron, the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry in support, moved up against heavy German resistance to the Vught-Tilburg road, from where elements were sent north to enter the western suburbs of Vught itself. Here, the battalion was greeted by the local Dutch civilians, who swarmed out onto the streets to welcome their liberators, after which the 5th Cameroons set about consolidating their positions throughout the night of the 26th of October. The next day, on the 27th of October, patrols were dispatched to secure the area in front of the battalion, including one commanded by Sergeant George Sands, which moved out and into the woods to the northwest of Vught. Moving cautiously through the woodland, Sergeant Sands and his men soon encountered a small group of German infantrymen, who, after a brief engagement, withdrew deeper into the woods, closely pursued by the British patrol. Private Richard Massey, who was one of the men in the patrol, recalled after the war. "We were chasing retreating Germans through some woods, exchanging small arms fire. Then, after the Germans made their getaway, we found this huge camp. It had ditches around it and was surrounded with rolls of barbed wire. As we went through the main gates, we were horrified to see the bodies of 2 male inmates hanging from gallows. I was only 18 and it was a terrible sight. We were disgusted. We went to the crematorium and you could see the barrows, and you could see it had just been used. It was a haunting place." What the men of the 5th Cameroons had stumbled upon was the Vught Concentration Camp, the first camp of its kind to have been liberated by the British Army in the Second World War. Unlike the later liberation of Bergen-Belsen in April 1945, Vught had been abandoned by its SS guards in September 1944 due to the proximity of Allied troops. However, before it was abandoned, the SS transferred approximately 3,000 of the prisoners to other camps and executed over 300 of the inmates in the adjacent woodland. Thus, when the British arrived, they only found a few prisoners who had been left behind, all of whom were suffering from malnourishment and disease, and some showed signs of torture and abuse. Later inspection of the camp would not only uncover the crematorium and gallows, but also multiple torture rooms, the camp prison, which was known as the bunker, and numerous piles of corpses throughout the camp, the largest of which was located in the courtyard and contained an estimated 500 bodies. In the wake of the camp's discovery, help was sent out to provide treatment to the handful of prisoners who had been found inside the complex. But besides this, there was very little else Second Army could do, as the camp was largely deserted and full focus was on the development of Operation Pheasant, the second phase of which was underway at the time of the camp's liberation. This second phase had begun shortly after the capture of Vught on the 26th of October, when the 7th Armoured Division began passing through the 51st Highland Division to exploit out to the north of Tilburg. Despite there being no major relief operations, like those that would be seen at Bergen-Belsen 6 months later, Second Army made sure that the atrocities committed at Vught were well documented, and over the next few weeks it would organise for units not in combat to visit the complex, as the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry records in its regimental history. The Cameroons liberated the notorious concentration camp of Vught, which they found deserted. The Germans had had no time to destroy the evidence of their barbarous atrocities, and visits were later organised by the army. The history of the 52nd Lowland Division, which was stationed in the Vught area in December 1944, also records that. After the rest near Antwerp, the division was first put in the line on the lower reaches of the River Maas. S-Hertogenbosch was the centre of the position, and not far away was Vught, where many men of several units saw for themselves the ugly inside of one of the beastliest of the terror and torture camps conducted by the SS.